necessity that I will read into the record. Upon completion, I would request that commissioners would make a motion of first, second, and adoption of this statement of necessity, which I will then put in the letter to the Secretary of State for this meeting to be held electronically. Here we go. Statement of necessity. A meeting of the Tennessee Commission on Firefighting Personnel Standards and Education, hereafter referred to as Commission, is taking place remotely at 10 a.m. on June the 18th, 2020, via electronic or other means of communication. Notice of this meeting was posted on the Commission's and the Department of Commerce and Insurance website. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity will be read into this record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated Title 8, Chapter 44, Section 108B2, which states, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. Furthermore, this determination by the Commission is as follows. Due to the impossibility of having a quorum of members physically present and the immediate need of the Commission on Firefighting Personnel Standards and Education to certify the eligibility of firefighters to receive salary supplement payments pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated Title 4, Chapter 24, Section 202, the Commission believes the necessity exists that requires this meeting to be held by electronic or other means of communication. The matters to be considered by the Commission at this meeting require timely action by the Commission. Further, physical presence by a quorum of the members of the Commission is not practical due to the current COVID-19 pandemic and Governor Lee's Executive Order Number 34, which has extended until June 30th, 2020, Executive Order Number 16, which temporarily permits safe, open, and transparent public meetings to be conducted by electronic means to preserve and increase the containment of COVID-19. Commission members are currently unable to attend the meeting in person, and participation by a quorum of the members of the Commission by electronic or other means of communication is therefore necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. Everybody heard the message. I need a motion and a second, please.
Motion to adopt.
Motion by Commissioner Speck to adopt.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Henry, I think was the first one I heard. Director, will you call the roll?
Chairman Biggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Hedgepeth,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry. I think that was a yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Curley,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Speck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Windrow. So that's 6 yeses.
Motion carries. On to the next item on the agenda. Assistant Commissioner Farley, you have anything?
No, I don't. Well, one thing I want to say this, and I'm going to let Jeff can elaborate a little bit more, but I want to thank during the time of COVID-19 and this pandemic has been going on, the Academy and the Firefighting Commission have still been working diligently. And, I know some of the recruits had to leave, and some of the firefighting, the fire inspector class was kind of, they had to leave when we had to close the academy down. Everybody worked hard on both areas, and our pass ratio for those classes was tremendous, and that shows the effort of the instructors and the coordinators and the Firefighting Commission members, dedication. So I want to say thank you, and it's great work.
Thank you, Commissioner. It has been a great seeing everybody work together still. That's great. Nothing further, no questions for Assistant Commissioner Farley. We'll move on to Executive Director Elliott.
I want to really echo what Commissioner Farley said. As far as numbers go, we had 45 recruits on campus when the shutdown occurred. So they were about into week 3. We successfully kept them working for an additional 3 weeks with online assignments. And then we had a 3-week period where there was just nothing we could do from a remote location. We did bring them back. 44 out of 45 completed their training and graduated last Thursday. The one young man that did not graduate was during the pre-meeting. You heard me talking openly to Chief Curley. One of his recruits was deployed to Washington for some of the civil unrest to help take a military stance there. We will fast track his remaining week of training. As far as numbers go, 100% of those recruits passed their hands-on skills with awareness with Firefighter 1, 100% passed awareness written test, 43 out of the 45 passed operations, and then everybody that was eligible to test for Firefighter 1 did pass. So that was the results of that. And that's really was a recipe for disaster to have 45 recruits here training, send them home for 6 weeks. No discipline issues, no real major academic issues. So we're very happy, and absolutely the Firefighting Commission and Brian Nicholson bent over backwards to help get that program back up running. As far as the academy goes, Assistant Commissioner Farley is working with us to more or less to go to our Tier 2 opening. Right now, we're allowed to be open on campus at 50% capacity. So we don't have anybody in dorms sharing bathrooms. We don't have anybody housed in the fire station because of the increased possibility there. In order to attend the academy, you have to be pre-tested. So that's the phase we're at now. So really July is the first month where we're really starting to open up to let outside agencies that typically utilize our facility to come in. But we're going to see about going to a higher level of opening, which really would allow us to take the dorms back to full capacity if the state deems that that's the safe thing to do.
Thank you.
Director Elliott, I have a quick question.
Yes.
However, you have resumed testing. Is that correct? As far as I think Franklin had a test that was scheduled that might have been canceled Tuesday, but now they're doing it Friday. Is that correct?
So we are doing field deliveries. So that was probably associated with the field class. Yes, and we're more or less the authority having jurisdiction. If they're comfortable having the training there, then we just we go through a series of questionnaires each morning with those students and temperature checks. So if the authority having jurisdiction is comfortable with open classrooms, we are back resuming that in the field.
Thank you, Director.
Yep.
Director Elliott, I have a question also. Is the sim still on shutdown from the Department of Health?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I had the driver sim scheduled to come out to West Tennessee. Is that still on pause through the Department of Health?
So, and really, we'll take ownership of that. Jason, Director Sparks and I was the one, because the Department of Health really doesn't understand that prop. So there's really actually no way to social distance inside that driver simulator. The fact that it's basically a camper recirculating exhaled breath. So really that was our recommendation to them, saying since we know that prop, there was no way. Instructors have to stand right over their shoulder in order to communicate. Most people don't have motion sickness in there, but it can be an issue. So the amount of body heat that's generated with people having to wear a mask, we just felt like that was a little bit of a dangerous recipe right now. We have not revisited that when we will open it up, and I really think we're just kind of watching the numbers. to see. So that I did not want to totally put that one on the Department of Health. Jason Sparks and I really said that's one of the ones that we're not sure we could responsibly open, but there's not a timeline set on reopening that one just yet. Actually, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I forgot to mention that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Elliott. Great job to all involved. I know we had some field coordinators that probably helped with that, and our Director Grande as well. Also, Director Grande, just for the record, I see that Chief Moore has joined us, so I'm not sure if you called him in the role.
Very good. We'll note it in the minutes that he has joined. Chief Moore, if you'll just do an audio check and let us know that you can hear us and that you can speak.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else from anyone else, you got anything else before we move on?
I'll give a brief insight. Testing is back in full force. Our FFC regional coordinators and contractors are out providing written and practical exams all across the state. We are in the final moments of hiring our West Tennessee coordinator. That person should be on staff July 1st, I believe is our date. So that's what we're looking at, is July 1 for that new coordinator for West Tennessee. Outside of that, it's been just a lot of work. We are Commissioner Farley and the business side of the house have been very helpful in getting our software and hardware that we use to do our testing replaced. So we are in that process also. So just wanted you to know that we are out doing business and making tests happen.
Thank you, Director Grande. Nothing else, we'll proceed to new business. On the new business agenda item is extension of deadlines associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll open it up for discussion.
Chairman, I'd like to just real briefly start. There are two sides to this. One side is the educational incentive pay program, and the other side is as it relates to deadlines for certification and getting your 12-month or your 2 years or whatever, getting your live fire burns done. So that's really two separate things. So I'm going to start with just a brief explanation of the rule 360-07-01 that relates to the educational incentive pay. Programs have to be submitted no later than October 1st. So when we talk about next year's program, it should be submitted October 1 of 2020. I wouldn't recommend an extension of that deadline. Peer reviews will happen before December the 31st. When they do their program, so the current program we are in, they must submit or complete their training no later than the end of December, and they must submit their documentation no later than March the 1st. Also, there will be no payment made past June 30, and that's a hard deadline set by fiscal. That's not set by us. So I just wanted to make sure that some of these dates are a little bit clearer to you so that you know when we extend, it's going to impact timeframes for getting work done. So with that being said, I'm open to whatever suggestions, or if you want me to toss out a couple of recommendations, whatever you want.
I think you have tossed out one recommendation on educational incentive pay, so we'll just tackle that one first and then get right into that. Is everybody clear on director's clarification on educational incentive pay for the October 1, 2020 deadline.
I can't hear Brian.
Can you hear me now, Chief Curley?
No, it's just barely. If somebody that hears you can repeat it, it'd be great.
Your volume's
Yeah.
just low.
My volume's low.
Yes, sir.
Is that better?
Yes.
That is better, yes, sir.
Director Grande's saying we need to address the October 1, 2020 deadline for educational incentive pay. His recommendation is that we leave it as the date is already in code.
That's the submission of the 2021 program. That submission date is no later than October 1st. And I wouldn't recommend extending that date.
Correct.
I agree with that.
What's the discussion and the pleasure of the
I do have a question concerning that regarding the Chief Training Symposium that Chief ACA hosts. Is that scheduled? Because that's where we pull a lot of our programs for the incentives.
Director Hallett, can you address that?
Actually, Director Sparks and I discussed that yesterday. To be honest, I anticipate we'll be pushing that date out in early September. Part of our delay was wanting to showcase our conference center, which it's a good lead in with your question. The completion date is expected to be the first week of August, with the builder having an option of 30 days for punch work. So Director Sparks and I was saying, I know we're wanting to, that's where we always showcase our 3 new in-service classes. We really want to do that in conjunction with y'all being one of the very first groups, training officers and chiefs, to see the conference center. So I anticipate, we anticipated the 1st of September was when we would do that, but we will push out with the coordinators what the topics are going to be. Actually, the 3 classes will be submitted in Gatlinburg for y'all's approval in July.
Commissioner Scott, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Mr. Henry, did you have your hand up?
No, sir, I just was agreeing with not moving the date out. I think that's going to be plenty of time for people to get their training submitted for that. We're already having to deal with crunches for their pay part of it. I don't think we need to have another crunch added in there for them to be submitting. I don't see why they can't be submitting those from their training coordinators or their training chiefs or whatever. I don't think that should be impacted at all.
Okay. Is that in form of a motion?
I'm just going to toss this out. I don't think it needs to be a motion. It's the rule. If we don't adjust it, it is just the rule.
Okay. So no action taken on.
Yeah, and I think
October 1, 2020 will be the deadline for 2021 training educational packets.
Yeah. I think that the peer review date should also stand as no later than December 31st.
Correct. And that's usually handled internally in the office. So.
Correct. So that, looking at that, this kind of takes us to the meat of the matter, which is the proof of completion date and the training completion date. So when we're talking about this year's program, the program presented in 2019, but is the 2020 program that's in process now. The question is do we extend the deadline from the end of December to a date out for the completion of training? And then do we move the date for the proof of completion, the submission of all their paperwork, away from March 1st?
Is everybody clear on what the director is advising? still is not taking on deadline extension for someone needing to obtain certification, correct?
Right. This is only about the educational incentive program right now.
Will that affect you getting the payout by the June 30th deadline? I mean, that's kind of cutting it close if we
If we extend it, it's going to go into another budget year, which is not recommended by the state.
Yeah, I don't think that's a great idea in my opinion, but just my opinion.
For example, if you extend the completion of training to, say, the end of January, you may say, well, now we put the onus on the participants and say, well, you used to have all of January to submit your documentation, but now you will have to submit your documentation no later than March the 1st. So what it'll do is it'll kind of force those participants. They'll go from having 3 months to get their documentation completed and submitted to having only 2 months to get that documentation completed and submitted. I'm going to ask really quickly, Chairman, that we allow Coordinator Miranda to just briefly give us an update about how he thinks, because departments have been contacting him about adapting their training plan. So Coordinator Miranda, are you on? And can you just speak a little bit about what departments, what you're getting feedback-wise from departments?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. 98% of the departments are not going to have a problem, are not going to have a severe problem completing their program during this calendar year, their 2020 program. We have two departments that are the two largest departments that obviously the size of them creates a struggle, having a 2 or 3 month break in classes. However, I have strongly suggested to them to do everything they possibly can to complete their program during this training year, due to the fact that even if the deadline is extended, all they're doing is shooting themselves in the foot for their 2021 program. They're just shorting their 2021 time frame to complete that program. And I believe they're all on the same page with that. The only deadline extension that I think would even need to be considered for the 2020 training year, as far as in-service goes, would be the 3-year rule on the Firefighter 2. But if it's been more than 3 years, or let's say the commission votes on a 3-month extension, if it's been 3 years and 4 months, I mean, they're still not going to get it. But it would just give them that COVID break time, or if it's 2 months or whatever the commission decides on. That would be the only thing that I would suggest, and I think that'd be the only thing that the departments are looking for out of this when it comes to the in-service side of it. I can stand corrected, though. We do have an audience that is listening.
Thank you, Coordinator Miranda.
I think that you heard what Coordinator Miranda said. The option is we extend the deadline or for the completion of the training, or they can make application. I'm trying to think of how to word it in a motion. A motion can be made where a department may apply for an extension of their deadline that is approved by the board today for up to 30 days extension, but that won't extend the March 1st proof of completion. I don't want to get into getting the door closed, as Commissioner Hedgepeth said on that June. We don't want to be trying to get things paid in the middle of June. We'd rather have it paid out and done no later than mid-April.
I'd be willing to make that motion.
Can we, just have the departments that have the need for that just come before us? Would that not be an easier way to do it instead of putting a blanket out there?
Chairman, this is legal. The reason you're able to extend the time past the December 31st deadline is because of the governor's executive order. Your rules only allow y'all to extend like the October deadline or the March deadline. So this is something you would need to take action while the state of emergency is in effect, basically, to determine if you want to give that extra month to agencies to get the training outside of the calendar year. Because that is not something you typically can waive.
Okay, I got it now. Okay, I didn't realize we had to do it in this time frame. All right, there was a motion on the floor, I think, by Commissioner Curley. Can you repeat your motion, please?
Yes, I make a motion that we allow the departments to extend that 30 end of January, if they need to. And the other thing is, if they change the dates that they deliver training, they were supposed to notify us. Can we waive that also? We're going to do training on weekends and other days that we typically don't do training in order to get everything completed. So do we have to make a motion to waive that notification also, or are we going to have to make notification of when we're delivering that training?
I don't know that that becomes a notification because that's just a email. You're allowed to do that without a motion anyways. The departments are.
I'm sorry, Brian, I can't hear it. Can't hear you.
I don't know that it needs to be part of the motion. I still think you're allowed to change a training day just by notifying the commission office.
There are some rules related to the change of a program about the times and locations of classes. Notice must be submitted minimum 72 hours in advance of new class dates. And if there's a significant change to the program itself, they have to do it 30 days from the scheduled date. So there are some requirements on date changes that if you'll allow us, we can perhaps address those just via email and allow that to happen in a friendly manner.
Will that satisfy you, Commissioner Curley? I think you're muted. We can't hear you now.
Yeah, we're just going to have to fit things in as we have these become available. So we may not always have like 72 hours notice that, hey, a lot of our special events and other things have been canceled. So we're going to try to slip our in-service training into those days that we had set aside for other things. So we'll be constantly sending you emails if that's what you want, but otherwise we're going to be delivering all the training that we had scheduled to be delivered. We just usually do it 3 days in a row, and it may be 1 day this week and 2 days next week or vice versa. So however we need to handle that will be fine.
I believe our those dates and times by rule, of course, by rule, they're supposed to meet those deadlines for changes of dates and times. If you waive that, it'll still come up in the audit process to review it if they're selected for an audit. So how do you feel about that? I mean, do you want to waive those requirements for emails or notifications to class dates and times? I'm not talking about changing your program. I'm only talking about changing the times of delivery of the courses.
We say this afternoon, we see that, hey, tomorrow we can do this class for C shift, and we just send you an email that day or the day of the training just to document that this is the day that it was delivered on, that advance notice.
I don't see a major issue with that as long as they're copying Coordinator Miranda and myself on that, so that if we have a need to run by and audit what's going on a Saturday, that we at least know that it's happening there.
Very good. That's what I would recommend then.
All right. Your motion was to extend until until January 30th. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir. The delivery time,
Yep.
allow people to notify the commission at least 1 day in advance of delivery of a commission program.
So the motion is to allow departments to extend their training, the completion of training, until January 30th.
31st is the end of the month. Would that be easier? 31st.
Okay, January 31st.
Will that affect the March 1st deadline at all?
They're just gonna have to get on it quicker and get it turned in.
Great question, but I would recommend not changing that date.
That's my biggest concern is the March 1st deadline because of the June 30th deadline.
Right.
No, the few classes that will be made up in January, they should still have plenty of time to get their paperwork in for the March 1st deadline. It may just be a few straggling makeup classes or something in January.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was on your same page.
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Curley and seconded by Commissioner Kelly. Mr. Chairman, or correction, excuse me. Director, we call the roll.
Chairman Biggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Hedgepeth,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Curley,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Speck,
Yes.
8 yeses.
Motion carries. All right, you want to talk about the next deadline we need to discuss?
So at this point, since if we're not going to act, we don't have to do anything about proof of completion. It still hits on March the 1st and the payment date still hits. So that everything related to the educational incentive program, I think at this point is covered. You've extended them. They can move their training into January with the knowledge that it may impact their program that year, the amount of time they have to train for that year's program. But they still have to get their paperwork in no later than March 1st, 2021. I think now we move to the topic that Commissioner or Coordinator Miranda brought up, which is how do we handle the extension of deadlines for requirements related to certifications. And I would keep it kind of generic, timeline requirements for certifications.
Do we know how many days that the state was shut down, that no testing or anything was available? Do we have that information?
I'm trying to.
No, we don't have to be exact. I mean, 45, 60. I mean, when did we stop doing testing and start back?
February.
The shutdown occurred on March the 16th, I believe, 15th or 16th is when most of the orders were issued.
Right, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Our testing was shut down, sir, between March 18th and May the 1st.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner Henry, do you have something?
So those were the dates that I looked up on the website that Mr. Underwood presented, and Brian. Thank you.
When you look at that, if we just kind of went back to the 15th, 16th, 4, 5,
Close to 45 days, it seems like.
11.
Yes, Director.
Like 10 or 11 weeks.
On the May 1st, was that still limited on testing? I know that Brian said we started testing it back on May 1st. Was that still limited testing? We wasn't going out in the field and doing that. We were still just doing that on campus. Is that right?
No, sir. We had some field tests that began. We started rescheduling tests at that time, but we were limiting that to 10 per test event.
Okay, are we seeing more than 10 requests come in at a test event? We're having to limit them?
It depends on the venue. We've had some internal discussions. Venues like Memphis, where they have a room that holds 100, it's possible to exceed the recommendation, which is what it was, a recommendation of limiting that to 10. We have handled that in the field with multiple test events, having a morning session, afternoon session, a little extra work on the contractors. But most of the venues that are able to hold a little bit more, we've been able to exceed that. But we're still urging social distancing and precautions. And again, most of the agencies are doing that internally anyway. So there are some limitations, but they're working through those.
One of our visitors in the room has sent me a chat that said that he believes EMS, the EMS side of the house, did a 3-month extension for similar reasons that we would do an extension.
Thank you, Director. Does everybody in the commission understand what we're addressing here? Make sure everybody's clear on that. Commissioner Curley, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
What's the pleasure of the commission? We've heard some.
I don't think that, looking back through the dates and stuff like this, and I think with Brian Nicholson's and Michael Miranda's input and stuff like that, I think that we should probably do, I don't see where 60 days would be unreasonable. A 60-day extension for the 2020 certifications. I don't think that that would be out of reason and would make a motion to that effect.
All right, motion on the table for 60-day extension.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hedgepath. Any further discussion? Sounds like everybody's clear. Director, we call the roll.
Chairman Biggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Hedgepeth?
Yes.
Commissioner Henry?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Curley?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Commissioner Speck? I didn't hear you. Commissioner Speck?
Yes.
That's 8 yeses.
8 yeses. The motion carries.
And the motion was made by Commissioner Scott, is that correct?
It was made by Commissioner Henry.
Commissioner Henry, thank you.
Seconded by Commissioner Kelly. You're saying no? Okay, who was it?
I think it was Hedgepeth.
Oh, it was Hedgepath. You're right. I'm sorry. By Henry and Hedgepath. Yep. I even wrote it down wrong. Sorry, Chief. All right. Any other discussion? I believe that covers all of the extensions that was on our agenda to discuss today.
So we have decided, the motion was for a 60-day extension, right?
Yes, 60 days.
Have one item, not sure if it'll be considered with it or not, but TEMA, I just got off the phone with TEMA rep, but TEMA was shut down mid-March through June 15th when they started to resume classes, so 3 months. That 60-day extension, I kind of missed a part of it, so I do apologize. But is that going to cover the awareness and operations course requirement?
I believe it recovers anything that had a deadline extension that would prevent them from testing. So if you're expired in mid-March, you would have 60 days from then to complete your test. It's what I understand. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I don't think the rule being applied is being delayed. We're only delaying or extending.
For like practicals and writtens and stuff.
Right.
Yes. And just for the record, show that Vice Chairman Windrow has joined us.
So the awareness and operations course requirement went into effect April 20th. And with that, you had over a month where there was no availability of anyone being able to take an awareness and operations class through TEMA or the academy or pretty much anywhere. I don't believe the 60-day rule extension would apply for the course requirement. Or if it does, we'd just like it notated in there that it does. If it doesn't, if we could discuss that. We've got a whole slew of people that have gotten tied up into this course requirement now without a course being available or testing being available during that time before it went into effect.
So, Mr. Miranda, is that the only classes we're having issues with, or the TEMA hazmat stuff?
That's the only thing that the course requirement went into effect in this gray area. That's the only thing that I think is going to be affected by it, as far as any like a new rule being implemented during the COVID shutdown.
Yeah. So the rule was what 420, I think, was sometime in April. The rule went into effect. I'm going to ask real quickly, legal counsel, when do you think that will go before the governmental operations folks?
It's undetermined. It may never go back before them, except in a summary. We may not have to appear. It has gone into effect, and I've received notice from the Secretary of State. And I guess I'm confused. That requirement basically went into effect on that date of April the 21st. I don't know. There's not a timeline tied to that training. It's unless there's some other timeline that they're talking about when you have to meet a calendar date. They take that course and they take the course.
Right.
It was really, it's 45, 60 days. There's no requirement they have to take it within 45, 60 days. Just in that part of the rule, I don't know what the concern is.
I guess what I'm looking for or seeking here is if we're extending the deadlines for everything else, if the deadline for that course requirement can be extended the same amount of time, either the 60 days that you've extended it for everything else, or a 90-day extension due to the fact TEMA hasn't taught a class in 90 days.
Well, it would only impact those folks who were training between about March 15th and April 20th. So there's about a 1 month window in there. And I think when we pass the 60-day extension, that's twice as much time as that window of time before that went into play. So, I think it's difficult, but I think that at this point that they can schedule those and not lose any time per se, and just they've got 60 days added on the backside, not necessarily 60 days delay in the rule implementation. Unfortunately, the rule hit in the middle of the COVID when they couldn't get classes done. But like I said, it was just from when they shut down around March 15th, 16th through the end of April. So it literally was about 4 weeks of time. So that's how many courses would have been impacted, is just whatever would have come in that little time window.
Commissioner Speck, go ahead.
I think what he's trying to say is people would have been grandfathered in prior to that time, not having to do the course requirement to test for HMA and HMO. Is that what you're saying, Michael?
That is correct.
So he was looking at extending that course requirement because they were grandfathered in and did not have to have a course prior to that date. But because we weren't allowing testing and TEMA wasn't doing any courses, I think he's looking for an extension on the actual course requirement prior to taking the HMA and HMO. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Michael Miranda, about how many people, were there any people signed up for those classes prior to us cutting that off? And if so, about how many?
As far as the classes, I couldn't speak definitively how many TEMA classes. That would be more of a TEMA. TEMA would be better able to answer that. I can tell you there's been at least one that I know of in East Tennessee, in Upper East Tennessee. But I can also say that I've been getting a lot of phone calls with people getting denied to test for HMA and HMO due to the course requirement, not having proof of the course requirement because they haven't attended the course yet. So I mean, it is an issue. I mean, it's not a gigantic issue, but it does affect quite a few of the newer firefighters in the state.
I have a concern. If we allow them to test without the course, what's the we didn't want to be in the business of holding certificates. If I get the certificate, I'm never going to take the class.
Prior to that, there was no course requirement. So if they earn the cert, then they earn the cert. They're not required to go back and attend the class as far as the fire commission is concerned. What the recourse we have is if we do grant a window of 60 or 90 days, if we do grant that and they're unsuccessful on either of the written exams and that deadline does pass again, then they're stuck. They have to attend a class before they can test, which is the current situation right now.
I'm going to abstain on this topic because I had 4 or 5 people that were caught up in that, so I will be abstaining on that.
And this is legal. It's unfortunate, but at some point, people are going to get caught up in that when the rule went into effect. They were going to have to take the course requirement, and it's unfortunate that it happened this way. But like I said, extend the deadline. This is kind of gray area. You're kind of working under the governor's executive order. There's really not a way to waive that rule that's being in effect under regular laws in normal times.
So your recommendation is we can't take any action and override.
I'm going to defer to the will of the commission, but legally, if there wasn't any issue here, there would be. If there wasn't the situation, there's no action to take. You couldn't just change the date or implementation of a rule that's already in effect.
Gotcha.
Makes sense. And it took a while to get in effect. It wasn't like this rule surprised a lot of people. It was out there for a while, getting developed.
The impact would be someone would they still have to get the course now and then test, or what would be the impact on them, Michael? If we take any action.
That's correct. Well, I understand, Michael. They would have to go back and take their course in order to qualify with the rule as it is now, not what it was prior to April 21st.
That is correct. Just unfortunately, there hasn't been any courses to take.
Well, the other thing, though, is to be consistent. If they went through TFAC or Metro or Memphis's Academy, they've been taking the hazmat awareness and ops class for years before they tested. We've just had a handful that weren't doing a course before they took the certification exam. And again, as the old head said, training and certification are two different animals. We have to be careful of that.
From what I've found, this is definitely having a much greater effect on the more rural communities than it is on the larger career fire departments.
Yeah, if they can pass the test, then now that you know the material. I mean, there's the other side of the coin.
All right, what's the pleasure of the commission?
I'd like to make a motion that we extend that. We allow them to take the test for up to 60 days one time. If they fail either one of them, then they have to take the class.
Motion by Commissioner Curley to extend it up to 60 days with one chance at taking the test. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Speck. Any further discussion? Somebody had something. Michael, was that you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm let me mute my phone or my bad.
All right.
So I understand the motion correctly. The motion is to extend the time for HMA and HMO testing for those who have already had the training. Is that correct? We're not changing it. You're not allowing anybody to walk forward and just take it. You're saying they have HMA, HMO from TEMA or someone else. They just have never been certified. You're allowing them 60 days to come and take the exam. And if they pass the written exam, then they will get the certification and move forward. Otherwise, they would have to go take a full course.
Well, there may be volunteers out there in the rural areas that haven't had a TEMA or a TFACA class that is wanting to test for firefighter 1, and this would just allow them to make one attempt at that test so that they could test for firefighter 1 in the next 60 days. And if they can't pass the test, then they can't test for firefighter 1. They have to go back and take the hazmat officer awareness class. Because prior to that time, we didn't require them to have classwork. Most of them did, but there's folks in the rural community that may or may not have.
So Commissioner Curley, I just want to be clear for my own good. Are you extending the date 60 days prior to the April deadline that we set already? When does the 60 days go into effect?
When we vote on it. Yeah, from April 1st, they have 60 days. April 1st, they were supposed to have classwork, correct?
Correct.
So on April 3rd, if they wanted to take a test, they had to have a class.
That's correct.
But on March 25th, they didn't have to, right?
So you're extending it from April 1st to July. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification, it was April 21st that the course requirement went into effect.
21st.
Okay, yeah, so July 21st. Because there may have been people that were ready to take right at the cusp of taking tests when we quit testing, and that would give them just a few days to reapply and get that taken before they have to have the class. They're either going to pass it or they don't, but they certainly can't learn the information in that few of days. I don't believe. I don't think they could get a class scheduled in that few of days. They pretty much already have to know the information in order to test this quickly.
All right. Now that we've got clarity on the motion, Commissioner Speck, you was the second. Is that what you seconded?
Yes, so we're actually just giving them a month and 3 days to get scheduled for testing, correct? Because they have to schedule it 2 weeks in advance.
From today, yes. But we've been testing since May 1st, so.
Well, they were being denied the right to test because they didn't have the coursework because of the rule that went in place.
Coursework, that's correct.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Farley.
So with that being said, today is June 18th. So they've only got from June 18th to July 21st now left in this 60 days.
That's per his motion. That's correct. That's why I wanted clarity on when his 60-day extension was going to start and stop.
So if someone didn't know, if a volunteer firefighter out there didn't know, or a paid firefighter didn't know about this extension, so they really only got 30 days.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And just so I can understand this, May 15th, 16th, if we use that date, May 15 to 16 to April 21st, it's really that time frame that we're talking about, right? That's the time frame where folks that had that HMA, HMO, but didn't necessarily need to meet the course requirement would have been approved. Is that a correct statement?
From March 18th, that's from March 18th to April 21st. Yes, right. That's the time that they was down.
So that's about 5 weeks, right? I mean, so if you add 5 weeks from today, then those folks that were in that 5-week window there may be in a 5-week window here. Is that reasonable? I'm just tossing that out.
So today is the 18th. Correct.
So that makes it the end of July, essentially.
If you make it 6 weeks, or just set a date with it, maybe to July 31st. That's a Friday. That'll give them 6 weeks and a day from today. If that's okay with the motion, possibly that would give
the motion and the second have been made for
60 days. But if you're willing to set an end date on it,
yeah, I'm willing to say the end of July. The intention is not to let a bunch of new people come and test before they're required to take a class. The intention is to allow those people that got denied because they didn't have the class to reapply and test.
But is what Director Grande's comparing it to is how much time was you not allowed to test because of the shutdown? We're going to give them that same amount of time on this end going forward.
Yes, sir. That sounds reasonable. The end of July.
Mr. Speck, is that okay with you? You made the second to amend your motion to extend the testing until July 31st, 2020, correct?
Yes.
Is that clear, Commissioner Curley?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Director, is that clear?
As I'm going to read kind of the way I'm hearing you, we're going to extend or waive the course requirement timeline for HMA, HMO to July 31st. So that somebody that wants to test may test without the course. So we're waiving the course requirement until the end of the month, end of July. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
That's the way I understand it. And is it in one-time test? And to add that into the motion. Commissioner Farley?
The way I understood, and I may be wrong, but the way I understand is it's meant for people that got caught up in where we stopped testing.
Correct.
So
that's the intent for it, Commissioner, but how are we going to police that?
That's what I'm fixing to say. It's going to be all inclusive, not specific. So, okay.
It's going to be hard to police exactly.
It would open it up to anybody that might find out that they can come and test. At least the folks that were denied because they were caught up in it would have the opportunity. Yeah, it may pick up a few other people also that hadn't applied, but at least it gives those folks that were denied an opportunity to do it before, because in the rural communities, it may be months and months and months before they could get a test scheduled because there's not enough people to deliver the class to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I think it's a great idea. So I want to get in my simple little mind. I want to make sure I was understanding. So thank you.
Yeah, it gives everybody a bye.
Chairman.
One attempt.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment? I said I was going to abstain.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Kelly.
Would it not make it easier or more cut and dried if we just allowed the people that were on a roster already before the cutoff. That way it would take out any of the ambiguity on who was and who wasn't ahead of the deadline.
Yes, sir, and I think that would be absolutely wonderful, but again, how do we police that? That's my only thing. Commissioner Speck.
We should have the registrations that would prove that.
But they also had the opportunity to test until April 21st, and we weren't offering any testing, so they could have signed up any after March. They had not got the opportunity to even sign up because we weren't doing any testing.
Everybody, it's not just, if they was said register for a class, then they was prepared to take the class and test anyways, Commissioner Kelly. It's to fix the people that was not able to test before we shut down and they met the April 21st deadline. That's what we're trying to get them people. That makes sense.
I still think everybody's looking at this differently, but anyway, that was just my thought.
That's my understanding, is that we're trying to capture the people that got caught up from the time we quit testing March 18th till April 21st. That was my understanding.
Right, and I think that Commissioner Speck brought up a real good point, which was about March 15th, 18th, they would have just not even bothered if they were going to do something prior to that April 21st date, but they knew that testing was done, they didn't even bother signing up. So we don't know whether there would have been 30 or 60 or 90 folks who would have attempted to hop on board before that 21st deadline, April 21st deadline. I also understand what Commissioner Kelly's saying, which is there may be a few people that jump on the bandwagon and just say, well, I'm going to run and go get this test done. And here's the deal. If they take the test, which is a difficult exam, and they fail, guess what they've got to do? They got to go take the course. Because we'll just document that they failed, and they'll get a little letter that says you failed. If you took a course that was approved, you'll have another opportunity to test. But if you never took a course that was approved, you'll have to take an approved course before you can test again.
Completely agree. All right. Any further discussion? Everybody's clear on the motion? Director Grande, if you will, read the motion again and call the roll.
All right. The motion is to extend the timeline for HMO to an end date on July 21st to waive the course requirement and allow a single attempt to challenge the exam.
I think we're going with July 31st, I think.
31st,
That's what I have, July 31st.
Okay, I thought you said 21st, I'm sorry.
That's all right, I might have. Chairman Biggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Hedgepeth? Commissioner Hedgepeth? He might have had to leave.
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Commissioner Henry?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Abstain.
Commissioner Curley?
Yes.
Correct. Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Commissioner Speck?
Yes.
And Commissioner Windrow?
Yes.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yeses and 1 abstention.
8 yes, 1 abstain. Motion carries. Michael Miranda, does that help fix your issue?
Absolutely. That's going to benefit the rural communities, especially.
Good.
They're going to get 1 attempt anyways, right?
That's right. Any further questions or anything else to come before extensions? I think that was the only thing we could take action on the agenda today. Director, do you have anything else?
I did not add anything else to this agenda. Intentionally kept it to this topic so that it would be a brief meeting.
We usually don't meet briefly, but it's a good idea. All right. Public comments and suggestions. This is opportunity for the audience to make comments or questions to the commission on its actions taken at today's meeting. You have to put that in the comment section, the chat section, which I'll watch that for a second. I'm not seeing any.
Guys, I've got to run. I got to run.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Only other item on today's agenda is our next meeting will be a work session on July 28th at 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time at the Park Vista in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We'll start a meeting at 9:00 for a work session, and then a business meeting will follow. At that time, in July 28th, we will draw audits during the business meeting. Any other information for the good of the order? Any commissioners?
There will also be elections for the new leadership for the board commission at that meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joe. Commissioner Windrow?
Yeah, just I'd ask you to pray for the Brentwood Police Department and the 9 firefighters out there this morning. It's a bad day.
Absolutely. Talked about that a little bit before you got on, so.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, the kid was young.
Yes. 5 years with y'all?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Just been married a year or two. His father's in the business, so I mean, we give the cops a hard time, but we're family on these kind of days.
Absolutely. There's no line between us, that's for sure. What is his father with y'all as well?
No, Franklin.
Okay.
Saul Franklin has a new fire chief too.
Is it interim or is it official?
Yeah.
It's an interim.
It's interim.
Gotcha.
While we're talking about praying, I'd also like to mention the Spring Hill Fire Department and the loss of their firefighter back on May the 3rd. Firefighter Earwood was unfortunately killed in an accident at his home. So let's remember the Spring Hill Fire Department also.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else? Good. Commissioner Speck? Oh, I thought you were just waiting. All right. I don't see any hands up or anything. Nobody unmuted. A motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Speck to adjourn. I think it was seconded by Jay Moore. Commissioner Moore, I think it was. Everybody hang around because we got to be official and call the roll for adjournment.
All right. Chairman Biggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Hedgepeth is absent. Commissioner Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes.
Commissioner Curley.
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Speck.
Yes.
And Commissioner Windrow.
Yes.
All right.
8 yeses and 1 absent.
8 yes, 1 absent. It's a motion to adjourn. Thank y'all, everybody. I would say be safe returning home, but
Thank you, ladies.
we don't have that here. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.